Welcome back. Sorry for that little issue with the technical aspect of things. Welcome back to Casualty 911 88.5 Soufrière FM. As I was saying, I was welcoming everybody to another edition of the show. It is wonderful to be here on a Monday morning. Our topic for today is World Kidney Day, which will be observed on the 13th of March 2025, which is on Thursday. And we do have a guest with us today who will be sharing her knowledge about the kidneys. She will be joining us shortly. We will be speaking about the functions of the kidneys, the key functions of the kidneys. You know, there are some parts of our bodies that we really don't pay much attention to. We don't think about them too much. And I suspect that the kidneys may be a part of the body that we generally don't think about until something goes wrong. So we'll be talking about the role that the kidneys play, the key role and functions of the kidneys, some of the habits that may be protective to our kidneys, some that may be harmful. And we will be speaking about chronic kidney disease as well. If you recall, last week we spoke about obesity. We had with us a nutritionist and also a member of the general public who had been a client of the nutritionist and who had gone through that whole journey of reducing weight. She had been obese and she had gone through the whole process of making lifestyle changes. And obesity is actually considered to be one of the risk factors for chronic kidney disease, among other conditions which are quite common: diabetes, uncontrolled diabetes, uncontrolled blood pressure, when the blood pressure is very high and uncontrolled, among other risk factors. Maybe our guests might mention a few of them, and we will discuss further during the program. So on that note, I would like to welcome Nurse Charlemagne Daniel. Just bear with me. As I've mentioned at the beginning of the year, I am trying to do some of the technical stuff. So bear with me. It's a learning process, a very challenging learning process, but here we are. Welcome, Nurse Charlemagne Daniel, to Casualty 911.
Good morning. It's actually a pleasure to be here. Yes, I can.
I cannot hear you, so I'm thinking that we may have some issues with the audio. Can you hear me now, Nurse?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you so much. So welcome. I believe it must be your first time on Casualty 911.
It actually is. It's actually my first time on it, my first time actually hearing about it. So it's definitely a pleasure to be here.
Oh, and thank you so much for agreeing to be on the program this morning. I know you must be taking time off your duties and so on. So we really appreciate it. And let us begin by you telling us a little bit about yourself, your experience in kidney health and so on.
As you know, my name is Charlemagne. Persons who commonly know me by that. I've been a nurse for the past 16 years. So I spent 9 years in accident and emergency. And then I transitioned into hemodialysis nursing. Transitioning into hemodialysis nursing is where I actually did my specialty in the field. So I'm a certified nephrology nurse. For the past 5 going on to 6 years, that's where I've been based. So I do a lot of advocating for chronic kidney disease for my patients. Hopefully we get into the trend where we'd like St. Lucians to be more educated on the disease, more prepared. They're doing their health workup and checkup so that we can prevent the disease. And for those who have come down with the diagnosis of the disease, slow down the progression of the disease and to get St. Lucia into a better and healthier state of being.
And that is exactly why we have the program this morning. We are going to try to raise awareness, to share some information that will be useful and beneficial to us as the general public who don't get to interact, I guess, as frequently or as in detail with some of those patients who are going through issues with their kidneys, who have chronic kidney disease, and so on. So to begin with, can we talk a little bit about, I just want, before we go into that, you talked about being a certified nephrology nurse, and just to let the public know, maybe we may not be too familiar with some of the terms. So that would mean that you're a nurse who specializes in care of the kidneys,
Yes.
something to that effect?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So as we go along, you may find that I may ask you to break it down a little bit for us, because we are not all very clinical.
Not a
So,
problem.
so let us start off by talking a little bit about the kidneys. I've had some weird experiences when I ask people, so where do you think the kidneys are positioned in the body? And I get some interesting responses. So let's start. Let's start by talking about where they are positioned in the body and what their key functions are.
So generally, each human being carries about two kidneys. You can be born with one due to genetic abnormalities, but a basic human being is generally born with two kidneys, and they're located towards the back, just below the last two ribs, um, towards the back rather than the front of the abdomen. The kidneys are really small compared to other organs. They're quite small. They're about the size of your palm, so they're really small. However, do not let their size underestimate the amount of work they do. They're quite important. They do just as much work as your heart does. Um, and really and truly, though they are small, they impact the function of so many organs if they don't work properly. So, what do exactly your kidneys do? First of all, your kidneys are responsible for regulating your blood pressure. It helps clean your blood. It helps take out any extra fluid from the blood that you do not need. For example, let's say it might be an ordinary day and you drink 2 liters of water. You might not need that full 2 liters. So your kidney is actually responsible for getting rid of all of that excess water that you do not need. There are certain types of salt. It's like I said, it's supposed to be able to help you regulate your blood pressure by getting rid of that extra salt. It does the same for your blood sugar as well. And one of the key functions the kidneys also do is to help you make red blood cells. The kidney also carries a key function in also maintaining the health of your bones, how your body absorbs and regulates calcium and phosphorus. So yes, it's a very small organ. And yes, we carry it. So, and sometimes we can really maintain a healthy lifestyle with just one. It does carry a bulk of work when it comes to ensuring that we stay healthy and we have a good quality of life.
It sounds very complicated. So, based on what you've said there, it seems that the kidneys work and overwork.
Let's just say that the kidneys, even though they are small, they are just as important as your heart. So the same interest you need to show when your heart is beating fast and you cannot breathe is the same interest you need to show to see, okay, are my kidneys working properly?
Okay. So, how can we protect our kidneys? How can we keep them functioning at an optimal level? How can we keep them working well throughout our lives? Or is it that their ability to work well gets less as we age?
Okay. So in the natural order of things, as you age, your body tends to decrease on how it functions. Just like as you age, your skin cells decrease, it loses its elasticity. The same way as you age, the functions of the kidneys decline as you age. That being said, the declining doesn't happen if you're eating healthy and you're having an active lifestyle, the rate at which it declines should not be such that it will affect you by so much so that at the age of 70, 80, 90, if you practicing a good, healthy lifestyle, it's supposed to decline. That's just natural aging. When you have persons die of natural age, usually it's just part of the aging process. So part of the aging process, you would expect that the functions of the kidneys are supposed to decline. However,
Go ahead, Nurse.
okay. However, what we, and I'm going to speak specifically to St. Lucia, what we've realized is that a lot of our lifestyle behaviors are what is carrying the greatest impact on how our kidney functions. And a lot of that has to do with how we eat, how we handle stress, what are the activities that we're doing, are we smoking, alcohol intake. A lot of those things we are seeing is what is causing an impact on our kidneys, and not necessarily the fact that we're aging naturally.
Okay. So can we go into a little bit of detail in terms of some of those harmful lifestyle practices?
Sure, I will do that. But before I go into that, let me just say one thing that's specific to St. Lucia compared to first world countries like the States, Canada, who look at statistical data and says that persons who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s are more prone to the condition, or more prone to come down with the diagnosis of chronic kidney disease. What we have realized in St. Lucia, or what we're seeing happen in terms of the persons who are coming into our health sector, is that younger persons who are in their 18, 20s, 30s, 40s, these are the persons who are coming down with chronic kidney disease, kidney failure, and ultimately end up on dialysis, which is absolutely alarming. And that to say is, we're seeing those persons coming in, but the places where they're showing up is in your secondary healthcare system, which is your primary hospitals, not in your health centers, which is St. Jude's Hospital, Tapio, OKUH, which means the numbers that we are actually capturing is way below down the margin than what we suspect is actually walking around in St. Lucia. And a lot of that is associated to either high blood pressure and diabetes. And as we all know, high blood pressure and diabetes are lifestyle factors, lifestyle diseases, based on how you living, how you eating, how you taking care of your body, how you handling stress, would create risk factors for development of high blood pressure. That being said, how can we take care of ourselves to prevent the condition, or to prevent, if we come out of the condition, to prevent the progression of the conditions? One thing I always tell persons is to know what your family health tree is. Just like we know our family tree, who's our mother, who's our father, with our sister, our aunt, our grandmothers, know what conditions travel through your family tree. Do you have a risk factor for high blood pressure? Did you have a grandmother with high blood pressure? Is your mother diabetic? If you know what conditions your family have, then you know what your risk factors are, and then you can explore what steps you need to take to prevent you or your children from coming down with those diseases. The other thing I want to say in managing your lifestyle so that you can prevent from coming down with those conditions is to ensure that you're doing your regular health checkups. Doctors would recommend every 6 weeks, but due to financial concerns, if you're healthy, you don't have an underlying conditions, as you're not diabetic, you're not hypertensive, then we tell you can do it every year. But ideally, if you're hypertensive, diabetic, you should be doing your routine healthcare checkups at least every 6 months, if everything is good, or if the doctors might choose to do it more frequently based on what the levels that they're seeing. I always tell persons, every community have a health center. It doesn't take much to just go to the health center and then check my blood pressure, nurse, take my blood sugar, nurse, so you can see what your levels are and have a discussion to know what is the next step that you need to take.
Exactly. So we have been dealing with diabetes and hypertension for a long time, but as you said, there are quite a few people walking around unchecked. They have no idea that their blood sugar is high. They have no idea that they're at high risk of developing
That is
diabetes. or that their pressure has been high for quite some time. So I agree with you on that note that people really need to be making use of the services that are available within the primary health sector, so at our health centers. And, nurse, apart from the daily Monday to Friday screening activities, you find that several health centers also do community outreach, sometimes on weekends and on holidays. So for those persons who may be unable at some point, we really need to try to put our health on the forefront of our minds and probably make a few sacrifices in order to at least know what our baseline is. Where are we at, so we know what our next step is, as you said. Okay.
Definitely. I always tell persons it's a lot cheaper to pay a bus to go to a health center and do a blood pressure check than to pay for hemodialysis. And again, the commitment is a lot less to get your values checked regularly, to be careful about what you eat, stay away from the processed and fast foods, stay away from KFC. The commitment to make that lifestyle changes is a lot less than managing a health associated condition, because it doesn't only impact your financial state, it impacts your family, because disease is just not something that would affect you. It affects your loved ones as well, because the burden of health is not just expensive financially, but it's expensive emotionally. And again, one thing I always say is, I think it's time that solutions need to have the tough discussions and the difficult discussions. Because if we look at our statistical data and we see in young persons are the persons who are burdened with the disease, that is our workforce. That is solutions productivity. If we cannot sustain our workforce, what is going to happen to solution in the next 10 to 20 years? So these are some of the difficult questions we need to start asking to find out what exactly is happening and what do we need to do going forward.
Okay. So I'm going back to the habits. In terms of the kidneys and the harmful habits, out there in the community, very often people seem to have that perception that the only issue that could affect your kidneys is not drinking enough water. So if you don't drink enough water, then you can damage your kidneys. So I would really like you to speak about some of the other lifestyle habits that may affect the kidneys negatively.
So drinking water is just one aspect of it. But the other aspect really is diet and how you live your life. Smoking again is a huge factor. Alcohol is a huge factor as well as other recreational drugs, over-the-counter drugs as well. For example, drugs like ibuprofen, Voltaren really should be used on a short term and not for lengthy periods of time, because it does carry some level of toxicity to the kidneys. Remember, our kidneys too, even though it regulates water, issues like salt and sugar, although salt and sugar is good, too much levels of salt and sugar becomes toxic to our body as well. And that in turn affects our kidney, because our kidneys are responsible for draining it out. Minerals and some minerals and ions and foods that are acidic, have a certain level of acidity, all of these carry some impact on how our kidney functions. Now, that being said, when we're looking at food, how we prepare our food is an issue. There are some foods that are better to be eaten raw than cooked, because when we cook it, when we're looking at drugs such as potassium and how it affects the kidneys, when we're looking at how we cook certain foods, what we've learned that is better to eat it raw. Because once you cook it, you've now modified it and increased the level of potassium in those foods. So it's not just about water, but water and diet. I know before, earlier in the studies of health, we used to tell persons that when we look at things like potassium, calcium, and phosphorus, we used to tell persons, okay, because those foods have these minerals in it, you should really stay away from it. what we've realized now is not just what the food contains, but how is it prepared. A key example of that is it's better to eat an orange rather than drink a glass of orange juice. One, because a processed orange juice, or the orange juice we buy in the box in the supermarket or in the bottles, it doesn't only carry potassium from the food, from the fruit itself, but it also carries potassium because potassium is an additive that is placed into food products, right? A couple of years ago, when hypertension became a big thing in the States and Canada, and they reformed a lot of the food products they had because they wanted to take out the sodium because sodium was a preservative. And in terms of controlling high blood pressure, they took out sodium. But they replaced sodium with potassium. So a lot of the processed food that we buy carries excess potassium because it's used as a preservative. And that, again, is toxic to our kidneys. And again, is how we collaborate plates our food and how we collaborate food on our plates. We tend to take in a lot of animal products, which again carries an impact on how we ourselves absorb potassium. And we don't take in a lot of fiber to help get rid of that potassium. So it's not just water, it's a combination of water and how we actually manage our diet. So we usually tell persons, regulate your diet. Small amounts of fruit, a lot of plant-based proteins that you can get from your nuts, your lentils, your red beans, and a lot of vegetables should be on your eat. You try to keep your diet fresh, healthy, locally grown produce, where that is not heavily chemicalized with pesticides and all of those things. And try as much as possible to stay away from processed foods and foods that are high in sodium.
So we have that discussion very often in terms of eating a healthy diet, but it seems it's a bit challenging for it to actually get into the psyche of all of us. I will include myself in there because, sometimes the public may feel that we are preaching to them and we're perfect. We are not. But I would encourage everybody to try to make certain changes. I always say we cannot do everything in one go. The habits that we have, we probably develop them over a period of several years. In as much as we may not have several years to reverse those habits, but let us take them a step at a time and not become so overwhelmed that we just give up.
I definitely tell people it doesn't happen overnight. I always tell persons, I like sugar. I'm not going to lie. I like sugar and I like salt. Now, honest, and that's why it goes back into what your family tree is and what conditions impact your family, which means those possible conditions are going to impact you. Now, for me, I've really taken a closer look and say, okay, what conditions impact my family, which is especially after I had children. I really had to go back and say, okay, what now are my children predisposed to and how can I change it? And one of the biggest things I had to change was salt and sugar. And the reason I got to the question is, why do persons put salt when they boil ground provisions? It's really not necessary. Why do you put salt when you boil rice? These are starch-based products. So anything you pair with rice is going to automatically suck in the flavor from it because it's starch-based. It's the same for ground provisions. But yet, when we were raised to, okay, if you're boiling pasta, you're boiling rice, make sure you put salt in the water. But when you look at it, after you've put salt in the water, which means the rice has gathered salt from that water, you're now going to, let's say you're doing stir-fry rice. You're now going to put season up or bohayo or ajobo, which has more salt, right? And when you're going to stew your seasoning,
which should avoid at all costs.
You're going to add more salt because for you it's a flavor when actually you really don't need all of that. Your daily value for salt is a teaspoon from all sources.
What's happening?
You can hear me?
We've lost Nurse's audio. I'm not sure what has happened there. But nurse, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you on my end, yes.
Okay, so we cannot hear you. So what I would ask you to do is whether you can sign out and sign back in. Yes? I'm asking my technical person here. Yes? Should she sign out and sign back in? Yes, nurse, you can try that.
Okay, no problem.
Okay? All right. So we were having some issues there, but before we lost nurse, we were discussing some of the issues related to the kidneys in terms of harmful habits that affect the kidneys, and some of the practices that really may be contributing to our kidneys, the decline of our kidneys, probably at a faster rate than just age would be responsible for. So as you heard nurse say earlier, if you were with us, for those of you just joining, nurse Charlemagne Daniel also spoke about the age at which they are seeing people who have chronic kidney disease, whose kidneys have been badly affected. And that is alarming. In your late teens and early 20s, when you have just begun to work and to be a productive part of the society, it is very early on in life, because we expect and we would like our people to live a long and healthy life. So imagine having to deal with chronic kidney disease or any other chronic condition for that matter from such an early age. It is alarming that we have people at such a young age dealing with those issues. So nurse, you're back on. I hope this time we will be able to hear you. Can we
I
give
hope
it a little try?
I hope so. So can you hear me?
No, I'm reading lips actually. I'm not hearing you.
Oh,
So we're
wow.
an issue with the audio here today. I'm not sure what else we can do. I would really like us to be able to continue this discussion. This, is your internet connection stable?
It is, and I've just switched devices as well. It's actually quite well.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
It appears to be on your end, so unfortunately we cannot hear you. So we would have to try the sign out, sign in again. I hope that's not too much of a bother. Okay, so nurse is going to try on her end. Unfortunately, we are having that issue there this morning, but hopefully when she rejoins us, the audio will be back on, and then we can continue the discussion and speak about the signs and symptoms of chronic kidney disease. Okay, I am just looking at our feed from YouTube, and I am seeing that some of our listeners, thank you to Thelma Albert and Fadia Campbell. Fadia was our guest last week, saying that you can hear both of us. So if you can hear both of us, I guess I will just try to follow with the live caption reading.
You can hear me now?
Nurse, I'm being told that you are being heard on YouTube. At least I got some feedback from some of our listeners. So I'm going to try to continue the discussion, although I cannot hear you.
Wow.
Okay. So
Yes.
let's talk a little bit about the kidney Why is my live caption gone? Let us talk a little bit about the kidneys and chronic kidney disease. Because usually when we hear about people having issues with their kidneys, we hear, oh, this person is on dialysis. Is that how it happens, that you go from being perfectly fine and then you end up on dialysis? Can you explain to us a little bit about chronic kidney disease?
So unfortunately, chronic kidney disease doesn't happen suddenly. It really happens over time, and we're looking at over a period of months. The thing about chronic kidney disease, however, is that it's classified into 5 categories, meaning that you can be at stage 1, from stage 1 to stage 3B, and not even be symptomatic at the time. Which is why, again, it's so difficult to even diagnose the previous stages of chronic kidney disease without a patient actually coming in themselves. Not necessarily because they're having issues with their kidneys. Usually the doctor just might just choose to do a routine blood test and realize that a person have kidney disease either at stage 1 or stage 3B, and they themselves might not be symptomatic to show that they have issues with their kidneys. Usually patients who come in with chronic kidney disease and they're symptomatic is usually when they have almost lost every single function of those 2 kidneys, which is really at the stage either between stage 4 or stage 5. And that's when they come in symptomatic. The thing about kidney disease is it's really silent. You really don't feel anything in the first couple of stages to tell you, okay, something is wrong with my kidneys. Usually if you feel something, is due to a secondary condition, not necessarily kidney disease in the first few stages. Persons usually become symptomatic later down when they are at stage 5, almost to when the kidneys are completely gone. That is when we see them coming into the hospital symptomatic. But it doesn't happen over time. It usually happens over a couple of months. But one of the key things I want solutions to understand is, like, unlike other organs like the liver, which is able to regenerate, the kidneys, they don't regenerate. They are not able to heal themselves. So once those little organs, we call nephrons, inside of those kidneys start to die, they really just die off, which is why I tell persons, God gave us 2 kidneys, and he gave us 2 kidneys for a reason. And he didn't just give us 2 kidneys, but inside of each kidney has 1 million nephrons, and those 1 million nephrons are what is responsible for doing the bulk of the work. So even if you go to the hospital and the doctor says, there's something wrong with your kidneys, I think you need to see a nephrologist, and the nephrologist might tell you at stage 1, it just means that out of that 1 million nephrons, maybe about 500 has died off, but the other 995,000 is still there working to keep both of those kidneys functioning to help you live a healthy lifestyle. So you're taking your medication, you might have changed your diet, and you're able to live a healthy lifestyle. It doesn't mean that the damage has been reversed. It just means that you're able to maintain all the rest of that kidney function, so it doesn't impact the rest of your lifestyle. But really, it's not certain. There are conditions that can cause sudden damage to the kidneys, and usually these conditions are reversible and can be treated by identifying what the cause is. But when you're looking at chronic kidney disease, usually it happens over time, which is why one of the things we're starting to advocate for as a healthcare community is to note that anybody who's hypertensive and diabetic automatically should now be followed and traced for risk factors, which eventually will lead to chronic kidney disease.
So thankfully, nurse, our audio is back and I can hear you clearly. So
great, I'm happy to hear that.
So I want to go back to some of the information that you just shared.
No problem.
One is, I find it very interesting that the acute kidney disease, when it happens suddenly, that sometimes it can be reversed. I would like you to just, although it's not really our topic, but it's our kidneys. We're talking about kidneys. So in as much as we want to focus on the chronic, I still want you to share with us, what are some of the things, whether they are lifestyle related, that would cause that acute injury, to that sudden injury to the kidneys that might be reversible? And it was very interesting also with the chronic kidney disease that I don't know, for some reason I thought that with chronic kidney disease there was a possibility of maybe if you're at a stage 2 that you could go back, but if the nephrons are dead, you said there's nothing that can be done.
Unfortunately, if those nephrons are
Very
dead, they're dead.
interesting.
What you can do is slow down the progression of the disease. If you're
Oh,
at stage 2, the doctor can slow it down. And what the doctors will do is, and I will go back to your kidney disease question in a bit. But if you're at stage 2, what the doctors would do is follow you closely. They would refer you to a dietitian, manage your diet, give you certain medications to help slow down the disease, have you come into the clinics routinely so they follow you to see how you're progressing, ensuring that you're exercising, see how you respond to that, how you respond to certain medication. If there are certain conditions that is causing your chronic kidney disease, for example, diabetes, high blood pressure, that would need to be managed as how you're taking your medication. Doses might need to be alternated to see how you respond to it. All of those things can help in reducing it, but not reversing it.
very interesting. And since we're talking about prevention too, I would like you to share with us whether there's any screening that can be done, I mean generally, or for somebody who may have a chronic condition like diabetes or hypertension, any screening that can be done that so that people don't, since you've shared with us that in the early stages, we may not see any signs and symptoms. So it's really a silent creeper. So what screening can be done for the kidneys? And who should be getting that screening?
It really is a silent creeper. But when we talk about screening, every solution should be screened. Every single solution. More so for persons who have a family history of diabetes, high blood pressure, who have risk factors for the disease, obesity, persons who have not just high blood pressure, diabetes, for example, if you have a family history of glomerulonephritis, because what we've learned now is that glomerulonephritis, which is a form of kidney damage, is genetically carried by the female. So if you know you have a mother or grandmother who has glomerulonephritis, that would be a cause for you to get your screenings regularly. Every solution should be screened. And there are 2 tests that we do as healthcare providers when we're screening patients. One, of course, doctors will do your vital signs, your blood pressure, your blood sugar to see what those levels are. The one we'll do is a urinalysis, where we test your urine. I'm pretty sure you've gone to the health center or the hospital and they will stick put a stick in your urine and read it and write it and say, okay, it's fine, or they would say what they've seen it. That is just one of it. And the reason why we do a urinalysis is because we're looking for protein in the urine. Now, although we're looking for protein in the urine, one of the things that we have learned to recognize is there are different conditions that can allow for protein to be in the urine. So it's just one of the first indications that we look for when we do a urinalysis in screening. If we have seen protein in the urine, what we'd ask you to do now is to go and do a blood test and another urine test, where that urine test would be done in the lab, and the lab will look for a particular type of protein within the urine. And the protein that we're looking for in the urine is albumin, because albumin is a big surface protein and it's not supposed to be seeping from your blood into your urine unless if there's a form of kidney damage. Again, to confirm that you have kidney damage, in addition to the urinalysis, the doctor is also going to do a blood test to look at how well your kidney is filtering. And one of the things they will look for in your blood test is a creatinine level. Creatinine is a free molecule that happens when there's muscle breakdown. So it's supposed to be able to be eliminated freely through your kidneys. If there's kidney damage, what happens is you find to see those creatinine, instead of being free, filtered freely through the kidneys, they start to build up within the blood, and we see elevated levels of creatinine in your blood. The third test you can get is an estimated glomerular filtration rate that basically tells us how well your kidneys are filtering. Because you remember your kidneys, they're like a little strainer. They're supposed to get what that needs to go out and bigger molecules stay in. So based on your estimated glomerular filtration rate, which is a percentage, it will tell the doctors about what percent of kidney function you have left, about what percentage of your kidney is working, and how much of that kidney itself is damaged. So these are just some of the screening tests that the doctors will do. And of course, they will have a conversation with you, find out what your risk factors are, what symptoms you are having, to help narrow down to a diagnosis.
So for the people out there who feel fine, who are healthy, and figure out, why should I go and get screened for kidney disease? How, or they've heard you and they've decided, okay, I want to get screened. Is it as easy as going to your health provider and requesting that a test? How is this?
It's easy as going to your healthcare provider and requesting a test, saying, okay, I've listened to an anecdote that talks about kidney disease. I would really like to know what my risk factors are. I would like to do my bloods to see what is, having a conversation with your doctor and seeing what your values are. When you do your yearly medicals, one of the things that a doctor screen for is kidney damage. When they ask you to do between a CBC and an RFT, those lab forms that they give you to fill in, one of the screens they do is actually a kidney profile screening to see what your values are. So it can be done. It can be done. And the first step to screening, again, is to screening your urinalysis, making sure your blood pressures are okay, your blood sugars are okay, and you can do that at any health center.
And that is provided that we actually go and get our annual screenings, get our annual checks with the doctor, visit the doctor. There are people walking around who have not seen a doctor in over 5 years. Some people longer than that. But before we go on this, I have a couple of questions from our viewers and listeners. The first is from Sheldon. Is it common for someone below 30 to have high blood pressure and kidney disease?
Outside of St. Lucia, it's not. So let's just put it that way. Outside of St. Lucia, it is not common. For St. Lucians, however, I don't know. I think it's because we just do not care enough to check. And I think it's because we eat too much KFC. I think we need to go back to that grandmother and grandfather cooking method. We really need to change what we eat and how we eat as well. But outside of
I would agree with you on the issue of what we eat, that our diet may not be the best.
It's not. It's really not.
Let us not blame one restaurant or one food provider. I think even at home, we may be a little too liberal with the salt. We also do get quite a bit of our bad dietary additions from the supermarket, if I can call them so. So we buy a lot of processed
foods,
snacks, because we don't consider our fruits as snacks so much. Our snacks are things that we buy at the supermarket.
A lot, but outside it's not supposed to be common for a 30-year-old to have high blood pressure and diabetes. It's really not supposed to. And we're actually not supposed to see the numbers that we're seeing coming in with those conditions. And even those persons, when we've gone out to do our screenings, the amount of young persons we've seen with high blood pressure is really, and that's persons who have not even come in. That is concerning to us as healthcare providers. So it's really at a matter of fact, as we are St. Lucians, to take more accountability of ourselves and more accountability of our health, and really find out what is going on within ourselves before it comes to a period where it cannot be managed.
Absolutely. So on that issue, our nutritionist in Region 5 is adding a little comment. She says, I think she was referring to the whole discussion we were having about KFC. She says high sodium diet, so that's Mrs. Campbell, high sodium diet and excess consumption of processed foods. So these
Yeah.
are really contributing as well. We have another question. Are there, from Sheldon as again, are there any physical symptoms for kidney disease?
There are physical symptoms. Unfortunately, like I said earlier, we don't see those symptoms in the earlier stages. We don't really see it between stage 1 to stage 3. But sometimes persons might even be in stage 4 not see it. Usually they tend to appear when you're in stage 5, when a lot of those toxins and fluid have been built up. And what you'd get is shortness of breath, fatigue, loss of appetite. You might have itching of the skin, swelling in your legs or your ankles, difficulty sleeping. Some persons might have tachycardia, a low blood count. So there are symptoms associated with the disease, but usually we get to see those symptoms when it's already at the end of the road for those kidneys.
Can you just tell us what tachycardia is? Can you break it
That-
down?
It's a fast heart rate, when your heart rate beating too fast, and usually again, that is due again because of that low blood count you get as a result of the kidneys not working.
Okay. So essentially, when we do get those signs and symptoms, we're basically ready for dialysis.
In most cases, from what we're seeing, that is when persons actually show up.
That is
So
when
yes,
they show up. Well, I
yes,
guess that is understandable given that if the signs and symptoms are not really present at the earlier stages, we
yeah,
have a tendency to seek medical attention when we're sick. So if you're not sick, then you probably would not have gone. So I hope that those of you listening to the program will really take in what nurse is saying about screening, about going in. We have so many of those silent creepers out there. I mean, we really need to be a little bit more proactive. We were a little bit laid back, you know. Um,
yes,
we may be a little bit laid back. We need to be a little bit more proactive. This has explained so much about the screenings that are available. And it is always important to have a discussion with your healthcare provider, because just sitting and hearing something generally does not help. It will help you, but then you need the details. The
yes,
details that you'd share with your healthcare provider would be what would allow the healthcare provider to make that assessment of risk, to know
yes,
exactly what is needed for you as an
yes.
individual. Yes?
Definitely. And I also encourage persons to screen what you buying in the supermarket. Read those nutritional fact sheets. Read those ingredients. When you go into the supermarket and you're buying a product, make sure you read those nutritional fact sheets so you can see how much sodium or how much potassium that is in those products that you're buying. Anything that has a value of potassium between 15% and higher has way too much potassium or way too much sodium. You really want those levels to be at least between 10 and 5%, which is the acceptable rate. The other thing you want to do is make sure to you any item that you're buying does have a nutritional fact sheet, right? Because I always tell persons, a lot of us run to buy CBL. A lot of essentially CBL is good with a packet of Cricks. But when you look at the label of CBL, it doesn't have a nutritional fact sheet. So you really don't know how much potassium you're eating, how much sodium you're eating. You just know it's tuna fish you're eating. The other 50% is to look for, make sure that when you're buying something, it doesn't have hidden sources of phosphorus in there. And you really want to look for PHOS. Any product that has, and you won't get it in the nutritional fact sheet, you will get it in the ingredients section. The ingredient says, okay, if you buy sausage, it's made of corn, water, meat product. You would tend to see PHOS. Anytime you see that, it means that there's a hidden form of phosphorus within that sausage. Because remember, just like potassium, phosphorus is also used as a preservative to ensure that the product maintains a long shelf life so it can be profitable.
Thank you for that, nurse. We have another question. Do we perform kidney transplants on island?
Unfortunately, we do not perform kidney transplantation on island. We don't, in fact, we don't perform organ transplantation on island. And for it to be accessible, again, it would have to require changing what the laws are in St. Lucia. We haven't got into that aspect as yet. There are some places in the Caribbean that it can be accessible other than the States and Canada, but unfortunately, it's expensive. It is very expensive, and just the preliminary testing to even get organ transplantation is expensive for the organ transplantation itself, and then you have the healthcare management post-transplantation. So preferably it would be better to preserve the one little organ that you have rather than the expense that comes when you don't have it anymore.
Absolutely. So in as much as we always try to look for solutions after the problem has emerged, sometimes it is way better to just try to prevent or reduce our risk of getting into that situation to begin with.
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
Okay. So, nurse, we spoke about sometimes it being necessary to shock people and so on for us to really take our health seriously. So in that light, I would like you to share with us. Maybe it may not be shocking as shocking as is required for some people to actually be proactive. But I would like you to share with us from your experience what might be some of the impacts on a person's daily life, their daily routine, if they are living with kidney failure.
Okay, so I'm going to answer that question in two parts for you. The first part is right now, we have about countrywide, we have about a little over 500 persons on dialysis. To obtain dialysis at OKUH and St. Jude's Hospital, I'm not going to talk about San Susi or Tapio, the price is supposed to be $150 a session. Ideally, persons on dialysis need a minimum of 3 sessions a week so they can maintain a healthy lifestyle. That 150 is heavily subsidized by the government of St. Lucia, which is why it comes around the cost of St. Lucians attach $150. The hemodialysis field or the treatment of hemodialysis is the most non-profitable entity in healthcare. No country makes a profit from hemodialysis because it's so expensive to just get the material and maintain the service. So a lot of the subsidy it falls back on the country's economy to support it. Outside of the economic cost, the burden of disease in when it comes to hemodialysis, when it comes to kidney disease, if the patients are not compliant and they do not take care of themselves, they tend to develop bone disease. They have issues with their lungs because of the continued fluid buildup, so they're not able to work. So that falls in the financial implications. And you have to look at the mental implications that comes with dealing with a chronic disease where you're always sick, you're not sociable. So again, the impact of the disease is really, really one that carries a great burden to the individual. That being said, the irony of the situation is that persons do not usually die with chronic kidney disease. They usually die with comorbid conditions related to chronic kidney disease. For example, issues with the heart, issues with the lungs, issues with the bones, secondary to having the diagnosis of chronic kidney disease. Because the kidneys, remember I said earlier, the kidneys, though they are small, they impact so many aspects of our body, meaning they help keep so many parts of our body intact and in balance that once they do not work everything goes in disarray.
So
So
I hope that paints a picture for those of you who are tuned into the program, because sometimes we hear about those conditions. We've never known anybody with the condition, so it really does not have any impact on us in terms of what that person is going through. Now, when we talk about the financial burden, the financial burden is not only on the government of St. Lucia, the financial burden is also on the family. And I think you mentioned it earlier, when you have a chronic condition, it's not just the individual, it's the family. The family is heavily impacted. So the financial implications, you may have the emotional aspect of dealing with that chronic condition is not only that of the individual, it also has an effect on the family members within a household, the extended family as well. So we really need to be a little bit more proactive and try to do what is necessary to prevent. And I think we've been hearing that so often, that lifestyle of what we eat and how much we move. Two things: what you eat, how much you move, and stress, and managing your stress well. So,
there's just
nursing,
one thing I want to clarify is that I know I said government, but I always tell persons, you pay taxes, I pay taxes. So whatever money the government uses is my taxes the government using to pay. So that's why I say comorbid or communicable diseases such as high blood pressure, diabetes, and even kidney disease, it's really the burden of St. Lucians to bear, right? Because right now, and it's just an appreciation that persons can have for St. Lucian healthcare system, is that because we have so many persons burdened with the disease, of course, government is going to bear the cost. So for persons who cannot even be catered for at places like St. Jude's and OKUH, governments actually pay so they can get sessions at private institutions. So it's really the country taking on the cost of managing the disease because we pay taxes. You pay taxes, I pay taxes, and that is where some of our tax dollars go to. So, like I tell persons, where you can cut costs as solutions is advocacy. You might not be burdened with the disease, but you can advocate for your family members to go on screen. You can be an example by going on screen and going and do it regularly. So it always starts with one to cause a revolution or to cause a change. And simply by getting into the habit of actually just doing those checks, a simple blood pressure check can go a long way in starting a trend to help ensure that your health is progressing the way it should, and anything that is deviating from what's supposed to be normal can be managed as early as possible so it doesn't impact or increase the burden that disease can have on a society.
does we have one more question?
No problem.
Are there dialysis machines for home use?
There are dialysis machines for home use, but unfortunately, it's not on island. And again, it's not on island because you have to appreciate one, what is St. Lucia's socioeconomic status? How our households are? How are our society being educated? How much do they know? So there's a lot of factors you need to put into place before you even introduce a service such as home hemodialysis, because you have to find some way to teach those persons you want to identify into the service. You ensure that place you're going to put it is clean, and they're able to access it on their own. So it's really a totally different service outside from what you can access within the hospital setting. I know in a few discussion I have is one that St. Lucia is invested in terms of how do they make it accessible to the citizens. However, a lot of the foundation would need to be set before it can be introduced into our society. But there are options for home dialysis.
Because a home environment is not necessarily, as I guess it's supposed to be sterile as
Supposed to be clean, yes.
yes. So I would imagine that there's a lot of preparation that has
There's a
to
lot of preparation that has to be done.
go into that. So
But
we
what
have
I can say to the person who asked that question is there's a lot of investment in the field in ensuring that the field persons are looking at it, persons are paying attention. There's a lot of investment, there's a lot of discussion. So hopefully we might be able to, I'm not saying might, but hopefully we will be able to get to the point where the service can be expanded to suit all of solutions in terms of how do we get solutions, not just managing the conditions, but also being productive in managing the conditions as well.
okay, wonderful. So we have come unfortunately to the end of our time. I'm having a great time discussing with you. Oh, I'm being given the go ahead, so I will take another 5 minutes because thank you so much. I'll take another 5 minutes because we do have another question I
Okay.
would like to share with you.
But before you take your question, let me just take a few moments to just make sure I say that within the program, because I don't want to regret not saying it, is that one thing dealing with patients with chronic kidney disease have taught me is how precious humanity is. And I can tell you one of the biggest advocates for managing the condition, for health reform, for getting the disease more widely acknowledged within St. Lucia is actually patients with the disease. These are some of the biggest advocates for kidney health, for managing your high blood pressure, diabetes, for watching what you eat. These are some of the biggest advocates in St. Lucia for the condition. And I have been quite privileged to actually be not just the nurse taking care of them, but actually working along with them in ensuring that solutions are aware of the condition, are aware of the risk factors, are aware of what our statistical data are, and how we can go forward to ensure that we're preserving generations upcoming.
Who better to teach us about prevention than those who have gone through it, who have experienced it? So I'm very happy to hear that the patients are being advocates and urging and encouraging others along with the healthcare providers. I don't know how you all do it. When you deal with people who have those very serious chronic conditions day in and day out. So I'm very thankful to all of you for your advocacy, and I hope that you will continue. And I hope that those of us who are out there and a little bit disengaged or disconnected from the whole seriousness of the issue, that we will be a little bit more proactive. We will learn from your experiences.
Definitely is what we hope for.
Yes. So we have another question from Sheldon again. We mentioned the pH of foods. How does it affect kidney function?
So basically, your kidneys is responsible for maintaining a regular pH. So it will look at various minerals and some ions in the blood and regulate it in the kidneys itself. In terms of maintaining your natural pH, we recommend going to fresh local produce rather than processed foods. We find fresh foods tend to carry more of a natural pH balance. They're not too acidic. Some of them are more often they're able to regulate the body's pH a lot better than processed foods.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, nurse, for joining us. I enjoyed the discussion. And based on all of those questions that came in, I think that some of our listeners really enjoyed your sharing, of your experiences. You have a lot of information in that head of yours, Nurse, actually. You were able to share statistics, and and all of that. So I think it's very impactful when people who are involved in the whole process can come out and share their knowledge and their experiences with the general public, so people can have a better idea of what is really happening. So thank you so much for joining us on 88.5 on Casualty 911. It was a pleasure having you. Um, Hopefully, in the future, I will be able to bring you in again. We will be able to bring you in again. And you did I think you did a wonderful job of explaining, so many of the issues related to the kidneys and chronic kidney disease. You can never have enough time to talk about everything, but we appreciate your input. Okay.
Thank you very much. I definitely tell persons when it comes to talking about the kidneys, I can go on forever. It's definitely one of those fields I'm really passionate about, and it touches it's really dear to my heart when I see how much of a burden it is on St. Lucia's youth, for one, and also how it really boils down to how it affects our economy. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity where we can shed some light. Globally, we're looking at how we can reach out to solutions out there. And definitely, when it comes to health reform and advocating, anytime you call me, I will be there.
Thank you so much for that, Liz. And thank you to our listeners. I see, let me give a little shout out to those of you who commented or asked questions on the live. Miss Thelma Albert, Mr. Sheldon Lionel, Zadia Averill, our nutritionist attached to Health Region 5, Mrs. Fadia Campbell, Daviana Harrow, Georgiana Cadet, I think I got everybody, Josie Sherlock. Thank you so much for contributing to the discussion, because it's important to have questions from the public. Your questions help to drive the discussion. I cannot think of everything that would interest people. So when you have an interest, please feel free to ask your questions. Thank you to the staff here at 88.5 this morning. Boy, the technical stuff, it was having me. So thank you to Cabrina, and thank you to Romanus, who is always out there in the background getting things going. Thank you so much to everyone. Please join us again next week, Monday at 10 a.m. for another edition of Casualty 911.